and welcome back to another lesson. Today what we are going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at reading and interpreting of maps and orthophotos. This will help with your map orientation skills to help you to better find and orientate yourself on these topographical maps as well as orthophotos. So looking at a map, this is an example of Paarl in the Western Cape. On this map, we are able to see many different features. Here we have roads running along the map. We have a railway line here in black. We have a river running through here in the blue line running across. And we have many different symbols and contour lines found in this map. But how do we know what they all mean? And how can we use these different symbols in order to better understand how to read these maps? So first starting off looking at our climatology, so looking at our weather. A very common question that they love to ask on maps is, does this area receive seasonal rainfall or rainfall throughout the year? So there's many different things that we can look at on the map to see if we have seasonal rainfall or if we have rainfall throughout the year. To identify that we have seasonal rainfall, remember we are here in South Africa, so we generally live in an arid climate. So rainfall is quite scarce in majority of our regions. So generally we're always going to have seasonal rainfall. We can identify that it's seasonal rainfall by having non-perennial rivers, so rivers that do not flow throughout the year. We have many dams and farm dams. Cultivated lands near the rivers, obviously to make use of that source of water. Irrigation, because they do not receive enough rainfall. And furrows to bring the water into that area. That is how you can tell if that area is a seasonal rainfall area. Which slope is the warmest slope? So again, here in South Africa, the northward facing slope is going to be the warmest slope that we have. So you need to look at the map and you need to identify which is the north facing slope and which is going to be the south facing slope. And then in which direction will an airplane take off and land? So some people find this question absurd. How can you tell which way the wind is blowing by looking at a map? Okay, so you need to use these interpretation skills and know to yourself, airplanes take off and they land against the wind to provide some upliftment. So what you will generally be seeing is you will see a runway in an orientation. If your runway is that direction on your map, you should know that your wind direction is either going to come from the left or the right. So your airplanes will either take off and land in an easterly direction or in a westerly direction. So that will help you to determine the main wind direction on your map. Moving on to the next section, we're looking at geomorphology. So we're looking more at the Earth's surface. Here we want to see what physical aspects influence the construction of your railways and your roads. So if we're looking at your physical aspects, we're looking at those aspects that are hard in nature. So we're looking at your mountains, your slopes, your marshes, and your rivers. All of those physical factors. These are going to influence where we put our infrastructure because we cannot always go through a mountain and we cannot always build over rivers. So there are different factors that are going to influence where we put our railways and our roads are going to be mountains. Generally, it's much easier to go around a mountain than it is to go through a mountain. The steeper slopes are going to be very hard for a truck to make it up all the way to the top of the slope. So generally they make a curved slope all the way up the hillside so that that truck will be able to navigate its way up a more gentle slope than having to go straight up that slope. It's going to be very hard for them to get up. Marshes is a type of a swamp or a wetland. This is going to be very hard to build in because obviously a lot of the ground is going to be saturated. So it's going to be very, very difficult to build through those areas, and those areas need to be protected. So we should not be building in those marshes or wetlands. And then finally, another aspect that influences where we put our roads and our railways is a river. Rivers can be very, very hard to navigate sometimes and quite difficult to build across. So it's sometimes we go next to the river, sometimes we build a bridge to go over the river. So that will also influence where we build our roads and our railways. How do we identify landforms regarding our structural landscape? So here we're referring to more of your topography and your landscape and your structural landscape features. So in your horizontal layered rock, your horizontal layered rock go across the landscape. In these landscape, you'll find mesas, so a tall, flat-shaped hill. This tall, flat-shaped hill is wider than it is high, so we can identify it as a mesa. You also get buttes in your landscape. A butte is again a flat-topped feature, except now it is taller than it is wide. That is how we are able to identify whether it is a mesa or a butte. And finally, we have a conical hill. A conical hill is when they have removed that top layer of hard resistant rock, and now we are left with the hill type of landscape. Your inclined rock layers. Now we have tilted rock. In our tilted rock, we are able to identify our scarp slope and our dip slope. Your scarp slope is going to be very, very sharp. It's going to be the side of your feature over here. Your dip slope is going to be a nice sloping landscape. So it's going to be a lot more gentle in your landscape. So you are able to identify your dip slope and your scarp slope in your inclined layered rock. And finally, we get our massive igneous rocks. Our massive igneous rocks was an old batholith found deep under the Earth's surface. Over the years, the rock layers above it has been removed due to your erosion forces. So as they remove these layers over the many, many millions of years, it exposes a massive, massive igneous dome-shaped landform. This is known as a dome-shaped rock or a granite dome. In which direction do the layers dip? So your layers of the landscape are always going to dip towards the gradual slope. So generally towards your dip slope. So if we have a landscape feature that looks like this, we have our scarp slope over here. It's a much, much more sharp. And on this side, we have our dip slope, dipping into the landscape. So we know that our inclines, they go in the direction of your gradual slope. So in the direction of your dip slope. Okay, a very interesting one, and one that they love to ask you in your tests and exams is, which direction does a river flow? So again, we need to use our map interpretation skills to identify these different directions. And the way in which we do this is we follow these following rules. Rivers generally always flow towards the ocean, so the sea. They always flow from a high area to a low area. Water gets pulled down the slope due to gravity, so it flows from an area of high land to an area of low land. We can notice a river's flow by looking at the contour lines. Your contours are generally always going to bend upstream. So here, if our contours are looking like this on our map, and we have a river running through the center, we know that the river is running this direction because your contour lines bend upstream. They're pointing towards the top. And then we have a dam wall. The fourth rule, when we have a dam wall, this is always going to be on your downward side of your stream. If your stream is flowing in this direction, here we're going to have a dam wall. The water is going to build up behind your dam wall. So it's going to look something like this. Your dam wall is always going to be on the lower side of your landscape so that the water can build up behind it. And then finally, the fifth one that we have is your tributaries join at an acute angle. So here we have a river flowing through the landscape. Our tributaries are going to join at an acute angle. So they're going to be very, very small angle where they join in. Okay, that is another way in which you can identify the stream traveling in this direction. So here are some examples to indicate this. The first one that we looked at said that a river will always run towards the ocean. Okay, so if you have an ocean on your map and you have a river coming into it, you should generally know that the river is running in this direction towards the ocean. A river flows from an area of highland to an area of lowland. So here we can see our contour line being 80 meters above sea level. Here we have the next one being at 40 meters above sea level. So here, if we have this one being very, very high, it's going to indicate that it's running in this direction towards the lower contour line. The third one, your contours are going to point upstream. So here we can see our contour lines are bending towards the upstream. So we know that our water is flowing down the hill in this direction. The fourth one that we spoke about was saying that a tributary join downstream or at an acute angle. So here you can see that the tributary is joining into the main stream. Here this angle is not very large, it's an acute angle. So we know that the river is flowing in this direction. It would be very hard for the water to enter into the stream and then to flow in the other direction. Okay, so it generally flows in at an acute angle. And the fifth interpretation skill, and one of the better ones to use in South Africa, due to us being a very arid climate and having a lot of farm dams, is to show which side the dam wall is facing. Your dam wall, like we said, is always going to be at the bottom of your dam. So your water flows into your dam this direction and out of your dam in this direction. Looking at our environmental studies and our sustainability. So how do we know that there is evidence of nature conservation? So nature conservation is generally where they're trying to look after the landscape. They're trying to keep it as pristine and natural as possible. So here we need to look for nature reserves. Okay, hiking trails, there's normally many hiking trails inside a nature reserve compared to inside the city center. Fire breaks to protect your vegetation from runaway fires, and then game reserves to show where the natural animals would be. The second one, what is the evidence of your conservational farming? So how do we know that your farmer is being conservative to the environment and he's looking after his soil, his water, and all of his nice plants? Here we are going to identify on a map an anti-erosion wall, so something to stop your soil erosion from taking place. We would see different camps. So if your farmer has a large area of land, he can divide that area of land up into different camps, so that now when his sheep graze, he can put them into this one for a day or two. After that day or two, he can move them into the next camp. They do this in order to protect your vegetation so that we do not have your desertification forming. They don't eat all of the vegetation in that area. We have rows of trees. Your rows of trees are very, very popular among your farmers. Your rows of trees protect the vegetation from the wind. Your farmers never ever want their plants to grow sideways. They want them to grow nice and healthy and in a straight line. So they plant a lot of these rows of trees to reduce the wind going into their fields. And then finally, your contour plowing. So we plow on the contour in order to keep your water from running down the slope. We want that all that soil that is washing away to be held up against our contours so that we do not lose soil. So those contour plowing is also another method in which we use for your environmental and studies and sustainability. And thirdly, there are sources of air pollution in the area. How do you tell if you have pollution in an area? If you are looking at a map, it's very, very hard to see in person. So we need to use our interpretation skills. So the first one, how do we identify air pollution? So air pollution, we'll be identifying this by looking at any industries, so any factories in that area. If we are going to find any power stations in that area, anything that would generally pollute the landscape or the air would be your air pollution. Noise pollution. So these are going to be the things that make a lot of noise. An example of that would be an airport. Airports are found very far out of the city because they want to try and limit the noise to your surrounding neighbors. So that would be an indication of noise pollution. And finally, water pollution. This we are able to see by looking at factories on a map. Camping sites are quite dirty as well. And power stations near rivers would indicate that we have water pollution in that area. All right, looking at your economic geography. So here in your economic geography, we are talking about your primary, secondary, tertiary activities that we have inside these map areas. Your primary activities, these are going to be your farming and your mining. It is your first form of economic activity that we have. Sometimes they love to ask you, is this an area, is it commercial or subsistence farming? So the way in which to differentiate these two is to look at these different interpretation skills. For a commercial farmer, he has more money, he generally has better infrastructure, very good irrigation systems, larger farms, he has a farm name, a cellar, dipping tank, and so on and so on. There are many different ways in which you can identify a commercial farmer due to the very nice infrastructure that he has been able to afford. A subsistence farmer is a farmer that generally makes and grows his own food. To be able to spot and identify one of these, you would need to look for an area where it's more secluded. So less roads, only footpaths, so they do not have roads for tractors or any of those heavy machinery. They don't have power lines going directly to their house, and they cultivate small patches of land. So we are easily able to identify either or by looking at these different interpretation skills from around that area. Describe the factors that are advantage and disadvantage of your farming activities. So an advantage of your farming activities would be your rivers, dams, flat land, power lines, and your railway lines. So these advantages are generally your infrastructure going towards that farm, so your farmer is able to participate in those different activities. Disadvantages to agriculture, though, are your steep slopes. It's very hard to obviously practice farming on steep slopes. You are able to use less machines. Water scarcity. So if you are farming in a very, very dry land, it's going to be hard for your plants and your animals to get water. So it is a disadvantage. And another disadvantage is your marshes. So having too much water in an area. If you have too much water, it may drown your plants, and obviously you're going to get a very bad yield for that season. How do we identify mining? Mining is also a primary economic activity. So here we are able to identify excavations, so diggings out of the ground. We are able to identify mine dumps. So if you dig all this material out of the ground, it has to go somewhere. So they generally dump it in a mine dump. Conveyor belts, you are able to spot on your map. Terraces, names of the mines, old mines, and your subsiding ground. That will all help you to identify where we have different mining activity. Your fishing activity also falls under your primary economic activity. Here we would be able to identify fishing by looking for harbors, fishermen houses, and factories near the coastline. Your fishing activity is most predominant in your coastal environments. Generally, we have the ocean where your people can go and they can fish. And lastly, looking at your forestry. Okay, so we're looking at your farm, your plantations. Here we're going to identify trees, woodlands, sawmills to cut the trees. Lookout tires for your fires. Okay, they need to see if there's any fires in the area. Looking for any fire breaks, and state forests. They will all indicate your primary economic activity of your forestry. Moving on to your secondary activities. So now we are becoming more advanced and we're trying to make products out of our primary economic activity. So we first need to describe the factors that influence the location of the industry. So why did that company put his company where he did? Generally, everybody loves to have flat land. Okay, so flat land is a lot easier to build on. They generally put them very close to your raw materials or your transport routes. They need power lines or power stations in order to obviously generate powers for their machinery. They need water to cool down the machinery as well as to help make the product. They need to locate themselves near labor. So they put themselves very close to areas where there is a lot of labor source. And then finally close to the market, so they are able to sell their product, but they normally put them on the outskirts of town. So far away from the people so that they don't pollute the urban environments. They put them on the outskirts of your urban area. Sometimes in your test or exams, they like to ask you, is this a heavy or a light industry? So a heavy industry is going to be somebody that is a big, big producer. They have massive, massive big factories, and they generally cause a lot of pollution. Your light industry is a smaller type of business. Here they generally do not pollute as much, and they generally do not cause such a nuisance to their people. So they are normally found closer to the market. So how do we differentiate between these two? Your heavy industries are going to be far away from the CBD, your central business district. They put them very far away so that they do not pollute the surrounding environments. Your heavy industry is close to railway transport. If you think about a steel factory, here they're going to need a lot of your iron ore delivered to them. So they're going to locate it very close to your railway transport. So they can transport a lot of that raw material in very, very cheaply. They also need very large spaces. So these factories, like I said, are very, very big. So they need a lot of space. The land is mostly cheaper on the outskirts of your town. So they generally locate themselves on your outskirts of town where the land is a lot cheaper to buy. Your light industries, these are generally close to the CBD. They are more market related, so they like to be close to the people and close to their consumers. So they locate themselves in the CBD. They need road transportation in order to get their products to and from their factory. Okay, so they need road transportation in order to deliver and get deliveries. Your raw material light industries are generally close to your primary economic activities. If you put a food production plant, you are generally going to put that very close to your farming activity. You put it closer to your farming activity, you'll have to transport less of that material, so it will be better for your pocket and for your budget. And finally, looking at your tertiary economic activities, here we are looking at your services that we can expect from a person. So here, looking at your tourist attractions, holiday resorts, and your camping sites. These are generally close to your beaches, close to your railway and your road networks. Here we can also have wine tasting, historical buildings, monuments, and museums. So these are generally the things that tourists would go to find on their holiday. Your museums, monuments, wine tasting, and so on and so on. How do we identify the different types of services found in an area? So the different services that we get is mostly the infrastructure that your government provides to you. So your electricity supply, here you would be looking for your electricity lines or your power lines. Your telephones, your medicals, so your hospitals and clinics, your post offices, sorry, that was meant to have an S in there. Education, so your schools, your colleges, and your universities offer a service to your surrounding environment, as well as your transportation networks. How do we identify recreational activities or facilities? This is a very, very common question. Again, they like to ask, where can we go to have recreational activities? So the way in which you can identify this on a map is to look for golf courses, athletics tracks, rifle ranges, or your racing tracks. Another way in which you can identify this is by a green block on your map. The green block is going to have, in the middle, it's going to say rec for your recreational activities. Again, you are able to see this in your map key or your legend. So please, you need to take note of your map key and your map legend when you are answering or looking for these different activities. Okay, looking again at your airports. What determined the location of an airport? If you have an airport, you generally need flat land or a flat area so that your airplane can obviously land on. It's going to be far away from your built-up area for safety, just in case you have a plane crash. Nobody's houses are going to be taken out. So it's away from your built-up area. And they can also put it away from your built-up area because of your noise pollution. Okay, we have spoken about this one before. Why does your railway line and road follow the same routes? and why not? So why do your roads and your railway lines go next to one another? Okay, so if we have our railway and if we have our road and they both snake through the landscape, why do they follow so closely? This is just mostly because of your topography, so your landscape features. We generally have a mountain pass, so your roads will generally follow the mountain pass in order to be able to navigate through them very easily and efficiently. And sometimes we have a mountain feature. So if we have mountain features on each side of this landscape, they are going to have to navigate their way through it, and they are generally going to take the same route through this to make it easy for your trucks to get up the mountain and to make it easy for your trains to get up the hill. And finally, for what is the dam on the map used for? So if you have a dam on your map, it is used for specific things. A dam can be used for your drinking water or your water purification works. Okay, remember people, we need water in order to survive. So we store water to be consumed later. That water can be used for your drinking purposes, or it can be used for your irrigation of your crops. So we can identify your canals and furrows, and for your recreation. So your yacht clubs, hotels at dams, camping sites, caravan parks, slipways, etc. can give us all clues as to why we use the different dams on that environment. And finally, looking at our settlement. So generally when you get to grade 12, it's going to ask you, why is your settlement located in this area? So human settlements, they love to use flat areas of land. Again, it is very easy to build on a flat area of land compared to somebody that's trying to build on a mountain type of feature. Here they would have to dig out the land first before they are able to put their house on the landscape. Okay, it's a lot easier to build on flat land. Humans generally always settle themselves close to your transportation routes. So whether it is your roads at T-junctions or along a line, okay, they can also settle along a river so that they can all use that river, like your farming communities. Your mountains might also stop your communities from moving further. So if you have a mountain type of feature over here, and you have many, many different houses on the side, sometimes they ask you, why can the settlement not expand towards the west? They cannot expand towards the west because there is a mountain blocking their path. Sometimes there is an ocean on the other side, so they are not able to expand into the surrounding ocean. So that is another reason why the settlement is located in that area. And then finally, is this area a rural or an urban settlement? You are able to identify rural areas by looking for your primary economic activities. If you look a little bit further back in this video, we went over your primary economic activities. Here you are able to identify your agriculture and your mining or your forestry. Those are going to indicate generally a rural area. In urban area, we are able to identify your secondary and tertiary economic activities. So here we will have more of your factories. We will also have more of your post offices, your post offices, police stations, as well as your schools and colleges and so on and so on. So this helps us to determine, is that area rural or is that area urban?